Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest on the Met Police's pretend investigation into Partygate as we learn more detail about the circumstances surrounding the questionnaires that the police have asked some to fill in, including the Prime Minister, but also that even more questionnaires have now been sent out. Apparently, it's been reported that the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, has been sent one indicating that he is now in the frame for a police fine. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, although we've added a new reason to consider Boris Johnson unfit to lead this country to the pile, namely being a Kremlin stooge as his megalomaniacal boss launches a new European war, it must be remembered that whether he is shown to have been provably committing a criminal act in office is still being investigated. We already knew that Boris Johnson and dozens of Downing Street staff had received a police questionnaire. It was already a source of ridicule amongst the independent legal and policing community that the police were not directly interviewing suspects in some manner. But then it all got very silly when it was reported that the questionnaires came accompanied with a letter that indicated the suspects had to fill them out under caution. It was also discovered that the police were allowing suspects access to the information on them in the Grey Report that the general public are not allowed to see. Now, there are things to say about this. One in support, I suppose one critical. In support, it was asked why suspects should be allowed to see what information the police had on them. There did seem to be a good response, though not from the police themselves, whose communication with the public has been poor. The idea is, so when Downing Street workers were interviewed by Sue Gray for the internal inquiry, obviously they asked questions, but there were no legal consequences for just lying straight to her face. At the end of the day, they don't want her to find them guilty. And so they may have been economical with the truth. They may have considered to themselves, well, we don't think she could find this out, so we'll just lie about it. I don't want to get into trouble. But if they lie to questions from the police under caution, even with this ridiculous questionnaire system, they could be committing a new criminal offence. In other words, they can lie to Gray. Now, there might be consequences in terms of disciplinary action, but not legal consequences. But they can't lie to the police because that's a bit severe. I still think it's bizarre to be allowed to see the report, but there is still some potential logic in order to avoid someone accidentally committing an offence. You don't want to invite people to commit an offence. But then there's the critical bit. The police said the Grey Report couldn't be published in full because it would compromise their investigation. There are no imminent court proceedings, so sub judice does not apply. But now that the suspects have been able to review the information in the report anyway, all of them, how does it affect the investigation to make it public? I have yet to see a reason for that doesn't come down to just corruption. So in actual fact, they should be able to give Gray the nod that she can publish her report in full, even though their investigation is ongoing. But speaking of corruption, there may be people thinking, I'm sure there are people thinking, the police are just going to cover for Johnson. It's all just a farce. And it is certainly farcical. You know, they might think they may issue fines to some of the junior members of staff, but Boris Johnson will essentially get away with it. Instinctively, I also think this. However, I will say that I do not believe that either Boris Johnson or his supporters are confident of that. Like, look at the evidence. Johnson's supporters have basically been threatening the police to make sure that they do not issue with him a fine or even publish the photographs that they've been given. They've actually been demanding that the police do not publish the names of people issued with fines. So if they do ignore their threats and fine the Prime Minister anyway, they want to try and make sure people don't find out about it. If they were confident of a stitch-up in their favour, if they thought the police were just going through the motions, and of course, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, would find Boris Johnson, there's not enough evidence, such as it's guilty, all the rest of it, you know, unique circumstances, that sort of rubbish, they would be confidently claiming, whenever asked, oh yes, of course, Boris Johnson broke no laws, he was quite clear about that, our fine police force will inevitably come to the same conclusion. Absolutely no doubt. That's what they usually do. If they think there isn't enough evidence on them, that's what they always do. I believe in British justice, blah, 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 blah. So why the need for panic and threats if they did believe that the police were going to cover for them? Despite the, there was clear closeness between the senior Met officers and the government. You know, why do they think there is a chance the police are actually going to do their jobs? So no, there exists the chance for Johnson to be fined. I'd be amazed if he is, really, but Conservative MPs close to Johnson are not confident of getting through this. That suggests a non-zero probability of the Prime Minister being found to have broken the law. Boris Johnson has now submitted his questionnaire, did it just over a week ago. So can we expect the investigation to conclude soon? I don't think so, because the latest report is that more questionnaires have been sent out, including to Rishi Sunak. Now, in the Chancellor's case, it appears to be connected to his attendance at Boris Johnson's birthday party during the first lockdown. Now, I'll tell you what I found interesting here. We've known for weeks that the police have photographic evidence that Sunak attended this birthday party. So why has he only received a questionnaire now? The cynic in me might suggest that by issuing questionnaires in phases, it strings the investigation out and allows events to overtake this story so that the conclusion isn't as damaging for Johnson as it would have been if concluded more quickly. You know, for example, the investigation was done properly, let's say it had all been done properly and Johnson was fined before Putin sparked an actual war in Europe. Johnson would have been forced out, no doubt about it. I know he survives things that no previous politician could, but this would be too much. In fact, you could sense his supporters all but urging Russia to attack. They kept using arguments like, you don't replace your Prime Minister at a time of international crisis. Of course you do. The Conservatives themselves replaced Chamberlain with Churchill a year into a global war. And everyone has agreed that it was a cracking move. Everyone. In fact, what you don't do is leave an incompetent clown in charge. Getting rid of such people is more urgent during a crisis. But that's the cynical view. The more charitable view is that the police have reviewed their first round of questionnaires and they're trying to do it properly. And contained within the responses in those questionnaires is evidence that adds to the Grey report. Remember what I said? You know, there's things they'll have withheld from Grey because there's no legal consequences. You withhold things from the police, that's a different matter. So the police arguably now have more evidence than Grey submitted to them. You know, and is that evidence against a wider circle of people working in Downing Street now? Are the police using the first round of questionnaires as not only evidence against the people who wrote them, the recipients, but also against people whom they did not previously consider suspects? If so, how are they going to determine the truthfulness of the responses they received when it was done in such a haphazard manner? And if you want a view that is a combination of both charitable and cynical, could this be Boris Johnson engaged in his usual practice of mudslinging, making sure that if he can't defend himself, he drags everyone else into the dirt with him? Remember that Johnson is only Prime Minister because the Conservatives don't think they have a vote winner to replace him with in the current political climate. A climate that they have poisoned with their treachery, but means that they are choking on their own fumes. They're stuck with Johnson. In order to remain in charge, Boris Johnson only needs to make sure that no credible challengers may emerge. Sunak has been seen as the favourite to succeed Johnson for some time. Now, I've thought it probably unlikely now for several weeks. It's too late for him, I think. Not 100% on that, but the longer time goes on, surely the more unlikely it will be. It's only going to get harder for him as more time passes. But he is nonetheless seen as a credible replacement at least. Whether the absolute favourite now is another matter. Is Johnson making sure that Sunak is also in the frame for the same consequences as him? Either they both get off or they both go down. And if Johnson is brought down by breaking his own laws, his party can hardly elect someone who was guilty of the same crime to replace him, can they? But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.